What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the White and Gold Talk podcast. We are coming to you guys after the Cavs 149-135 win over the Denver Nuggets on Friday night. Chris, you were there. This was one of the most offensive firepower showcases that the Cavs have had this season. What did you take away from this one?
Forget this season, Ethan. Franchise history. Most points that the Cavs have ever scored in a non-overtime game. In franchise history, they were unstoppable. Denver tried a bunch of different things. They came in with a specific strategy, but the conundrum that they were in is the same one that opponents have been in all season long. What do you do? Like, who do you leave open? Who do you double team? What do you try and take away? So, like, every team is going to come into every single game saying, we're going to try and take something away. We're going to try and keep from giving up everything. But Denver was giving up everything, especially the three-point line to the Cavs. And they just were unstoppable. They were on a different level. They've been on a different level than many teams around the NBA. In the words of Jared Allen to me in the locker room after the game tonight, we're playing really good basketball against everybody except the Atlanta Hawks. and it's true. Atlanta's gotten them twice. But for the most part, nobody has been able to consistently find a way to slow down this offensive machine. Denver scored 135 tonight. 135. That is good enough to win many games in the NBA. It's not good enough against the Cavs. Not when they're scoring 30 points every single quarter. Not when they're scoring 149. Not when they have an offensive rating of 149 midway through the third quarter. So it just was a continuation of everything that they've been preaching, everything that they've been working on behind the scenes. And I don't know what the answer is to try and slow down this offense. Like, at some point, you just kind of have to hope they miss. And they haven't been missing. They made at least 23s for the fourth straight time. There are two teams in NBA history that have accomplished that, Ethan. Two in all of NBA history. This year's Cavs and last year's Boston Celtics, who won the NBA championship. That is the level that the Cavs are playing at right now.
Chris, I like to keep a running tab of the stats going on in each game. In tonight's contest, I had to go to my notes app, like to make sure that it was kind of collectively getting into all the different things that were happening today. And you mentioned it. Franchise history, season highs, all of those things were tapped into. And I want to just run through those a little bit. You mentioned the 3-point numbers. The Cavs had 23 threes tonight. One. Two, this is also the second time that they've had 20 or more threes against the Denver Nuggets in their two matchups, because coming into the game, their season high was 22 for the season. They had done it twice against the Denver Nuggets on December 5th and the Philadelphia 76ers on December 21st. So kind of shows you the different defenses that they were able to do those against. Tonight was the fifth time the Cavs had four or more players score 20 or more points, the most in the NBA. That's Donovan Mitchell with 30 plus, Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, all with 20 plus. The only other season the Cavs have had five or more games with four or more 20 plus point scores, 1971-1972. It's been a long time coming for the Cavs to have the offense that they've wanted, that they've had, that they've seen this season, and a lot of credit goes to Kenny Atkinson. But Chris, when you look at the stat sheet and you look at how the Cavs played tonight, I feel like something stood out to me that I wanted to make very clear at the beginning of this podcast. It felt like every criticism that the players on this team had, each individual player that had a decent game tonight was able to counter those in their performances tonight. Evan Mobley, not able to shoot threes coming into the season or wasn't able to space the floor. 4 of 6. Just the second time this season that he's shot back-to-back games with three or more threes in a contest. Dean Wade can be finicky, injured, whatever. 3 of 4 from three tonight, 11 points, plus minus of 19. He had the highest plus minus of the game. Jared Allen, The lights are too bright against some of the best players in the league. Going up against Nikola Jokic, 10 of 13, 22 points, 10 boards, 4 assists, 3 steals, 1 block. Darius Garland, not able to play within the trees, not able to absorb contact, not as good on the defensive end. 10 of 18, just 2 3 pointers, so 8 of those coming within the lane or mid range shots, floaters being a huge part of his game tonight. He had 7 assists, 4 steals, Chris. Point of attack defense was crazy. You also talk about getting into the lane and being able to disrupt passing lanes and things of that nature. Donovan Mitchell potentially not able to lead a playoff caliber or playoff ready team and be the star on that team. Donovan had 30 points, led that squad, and showed that he is a MVP caliber player, and he's done it all season. So I think it's interesting that, and we can keep going on these different players, but those were the biggest ones that stood out to me and how they were able to counter some of the things that other reporters, other national media have said about them coming into the season.
And they did it against Denver too. That's the thing. Kenny Atkinson talked before the game about how he was looking forward to the next week because it was a test in the schedule. He understands the numbers. The numbers say that the Cavs have had one of the easiest schedules of any team in the NBA at the start of this season. And the rest of the way, starting with tonight against Denver, they've got the second most difficult schedule of any team in the NBA. So this is the tough stretch. This is the test, the quote unquote test. And Kenny said it before the game. We get an opportunity to test ourselves against championship level teams, championship level players. We get to find out just how good we really are, as if anybody is still wondering how good the Cavs really are. I mean, they continue to prove how good they really are. I don't know what else they could show anybody that may be a doubter at this point in time. But this wasn't Washington. You know what I mean? This wasn't Detroit. This was the Denver Nuggets, and you can sit there and you can say that they haven't been as good defensively throughout the course of this year, and that's true. Michael Malone talked about it pregame. Nikola Jokic talked about it after the game. They are not a good defensive team at this point. They're basically middle of the pack in defense. You can also sit there and say that they didn't have Aaron Gordon, who is a key piece of their starting lineup, a key member of the team that won the championship a couple of years ago. That's also true. They didn't have Aaron Gordon. They weren't at full strength. But Friday night wasn't about Denver not being at full strength. Friday night wasn't about Denver not being at its best. Friday night was about the Cavs being too good. And they've been too good for a lot of opponents. And it hasn't mattered the level of competition that they've played against. It hasn't mattered if they're playing at home versus on the road. It doesn't matter if it's the second game of a back-to-back. It doesn't matter if it's after a long layoff in the schedule. They have built consistent habits that they can tap into on a nightly basis. And as Kenny Atkinson has talked about throughout the first 30 plus games of the season, there have not been very many stinkers. And that is the mark of a really, really good basketball team. So we're going to find out as this season goes on and as the schedule stiffens just how good the Cavs are, I guess. But it's like every time anybody wants to talk about this test for the Cavs, this test for the Cavs, this test for the Cavs, it doesn't look like a test at all. Like as I wrote in my game story tonight, maybe the test comes Monday against Golden State. Maybe it comes the next game against the Lakers because Denver's just not on the level of the Cavs. They've played 2 games against the Cavs, and the Cavs have basically run away from them in both of those. And Denver's a team with championship aspirations. So every team around the NBA, every person around the NBA is starting to realize that it's not about the opponent. It's not about the schedule. It's not about all these other ancillary factors that you want to throw out there. It's that the Cavs are really freaking good.
And Chris, it's interesting. I mean, you make a good point about Golden State because they offer so many different problems to multiple different teams. But when you talk about the numbers and everything that the Cavs were able to accomplish tonight, obviously 149 being the season high for points in a game, and you mentioned it were for the biggest road win and biggest non-overtime scoring game for them in franchise history. Like that, but also the Cavs had two 40-point quarters for the first half. They had 80 points coming out of the first half. That was their second best first half of the season. Their first against the Golden State Warriors earlier this
Hmm.
season, where they just went at the team, right? And I feel like it's interesting because at that point, the Cavs had to have a conversation at halftime, or not at halftime, after the game with Tristan Thompson, as I recall, about letting teams back into games and not
Hmm.
allowing themselves the adequate rest that they so need in this long and grueling 82 game season because they let Golden State, a great team, back into the contest. And they haven't done that in recent history. They haven't played with their food as much, even though they've at times let teams go on runs and then go on a run of their own. So I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see how much the Cavs have grown against a team that they show they can have some of the best offensive numbers of their season against, but also that can also dwindle at some times when it comes to their focus. So I think it's definitely going to be a good game on Monday.
And so Donovan Mitchell's in the locker room after the game, and he pulls up the box score on his phone, and he looks and he sees that he only played 30 minutes tonight in another blowout, another game where the Cavs didn't have to be over reliant on him, didn't have to push him too much. And he was like, well, wait, I only played 30 minutes tonight? Yeah, another game where I only had to play 30. So it's like these guys are aware of it and their bodies are feeling it and they're benefiting from it and they're going to benefit when April, May, and June roll around. If you think back to last year's team, many of the guys were just in a physical, mental state of exhaustion. They had been run into the ground during the regular season, in part because 6 weeks were played without Evan Mobley and Darius Garland simultaneously. In part because they didn't have Ty Jerome, but for 2 games, so they didn't have the same amount of depth. In part because JB Bickerstaff approaches his rotation a different kind of way than Kenny Atkinson does, just like every coach has their own way of doing things when it comes to their rotation. But you can feel it around this locker room with the guys. They don't feel like they're overextended here at the beginning of the season. And Kenny Atkinson has a big picture plan to make sure that that continues. And if that's going to continue, then that means, contributions up and down the roster, similar to what the Cavs have gotten throughout the course of this season. And, I know a lot of people always talk about trades and who the Cavs may be interested in and what are they going to do ahead of the trade deadline. I was talking to somebody about this before the game on the court in Denver, and we were both saying, like, for the Cavs to be the team that they want to be, for the Cavs to be the team that they've been at the beginning of the season, they need everybody on this roster. So if you're going to talk about an addition, that's cool. That's fine. A lot of people are talking about it. People around the NBA are calling the Cavs saying, hey, what are you thinking about doing at the trade deadline? But understand this, every addition comes with a subtraction. Who are you subtracting from this team right now? Who are you feeling like is expendable, quote unquote, expendable for this team right now? Because they need Sam Merrill shooting off the bench. They need his gravity. They need his movement. They need George Niang to swallow up some of the power forward minutes and space the floor and run to the corners and his basketball IQ. And you can keep going on and on and on with the list. The reason why the Cavs have been such a great team at the beginning of the season with a league best record, the reason why they're taking down franchise records that have stood for more than 3 decades is because of everybody. It's not because of Donovan or only Darius or the core four. It's because of everybody. So just understand that when you're talking about additions at the trade deadline, that also comes with a subtraction. And subtractions are very, very dangerous for a team that is playing like this. And I thought tonight, Jared Allen was great, and Donovan was great, and Evan Mobley was great. Dean Wade was underrated, really, really good. I thought Sam Merrill gave them some really good minutes. Karis LeVert with his energy and his effort, all of that kind of stuff. So they need everybody on this team to be this team that they are.
Chris, and I think it's a really good point that you make about the roster and its makeup and how everybody has, and like I said earlier, kind of fallen into their own place, right? And grown into the player that the Cavs have needed them to be. Karis LeVert being as efficient as he's been this season. I think there are two plays that really stood out to me, or there's a bunch, but two that I want to mention just quickly. One being Karis LeVert literally catching a pass from Donovan Mitchell in the mid range, looking at what the spacing looked like, and saying, "Nope, I'm gonna dribble it back out to the 3 point line and reset the entire offense." I was like, this time last year, that was not even fathomable for
Right.
Karis LeVert. Love that. And then, as good as the offense was tonight, my second favorite play came on the defensive end, where, like, I think it was Christian Brown drove to the lane, Jared Allen flashed, and deterred him. He literally turned away. It was like, no, kicked it out,
Mm-hmm.
to another player. Darius Garland fronted up. Darius Garland's out there, who again 4 steals, made him kick. Then Evan Mobley's on the perimeter and defending, and then they drive or whatever. Like, it was just a great overall defensive possession where you look at the rotations, you look at everybody being able to play their part to the point that it wasn't gonna give the Nuggets, especially with one of the best offensive hubs in Nikola Jokic, an opportunity to score. And Chris, it's not like Nikola Jokic didn't have a good game. He
He
was
had a triple double.
27. Yeah, he had a triple double, 27
Yeah.
points, 14
Yeah.
rebounds, 13 assists. And in the last game against the Denver Nuggets, Nikola Jokic had 27 points, 20 rebounds, and 11 assists. And the Cavs won that game handily too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like, like, they won it by 12 points. Handily might be a stretch, but still, like, I think it shows that the Cavs can allow some of these other teams' best players. And again, I've said this earlier on this podcast earlier in the year. They're using a strategy that they once had used against them, against opposing teams. And Jamal Murray had 27 points tonight, 11 assists. That, like, still wasn't enough for this Denver
Right.
Nuggets team to get it done because of the offensive buzzsaw that the Cleveland Cavaliers are.
That's what I was saying. Like, Denver played well. Denver shot 56% from the field. Denver shot better than 40% from 3 point range. Um, Denver got a triple double from Jokic, a double double from Jamal Murray. Michael Porter Jr. had 15 points in the first half. Like, this wasn't about Denver. This wasn't about Denver not playing well or having a clunker at home or being on the first game of a back to back, coming off a Christmas Day game or anything along those lines, right? Like, this is just another continuation of the Cavs are just better than most teams. Like, at some point, people are just going to have to accept that. And we can sit here and we can talk about tests and da 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 da. And obviously, Kenny Atkinson was going to talk about that because he's a coach and he's always looking for data, and he's always looking for opportunities to see how the Cavs play against championship caliber opponents, to see what works against them, what doesn't work against them, what kinds of things does he want to implement moving forward before the playoffs roll around, and all these different things. And I know that the Cavs aren't Boston specifically. Like, Boston is the reigning NBA champs. They're on a different tier than, in my opinion, everybody else in the NBA. But, like, do you think Boston is talking about tests? Like, oh, we're going on this West Coast road trip against Denver, Dallas, Los Angeles, Golden State, and we got to test ourselves and we got to see just how good we really are, and we got to see how we measure up to these. No, they're not saying that because they're like, bleep that. Like, we're the test. We're the test for them. Like, we don't have to measure up to anybody. We're better than everybody. Um, so I mean, I think it's fine for the Cavs to think the same kind of like Golden State's not a test for the Cavs. The Cavs are a test for Golden State, right? Dallas is not a test for the Cavs. The Cavs are a test for the Mavericks. Like these teams have to catch up to the Cavs. They're one of 5 teams that are top 10 in offense and defense. They have the second highest point differential in the entire NBA. They have the league's best record. So I know we get into this stuff about tests and we have to write about it because Kenny Atkinson said it and he used that term. But even Donovan kind of like shrugged that comment off in the locker room after the game. He was like, yeah, I know everybody's kind of looking at this like a test, but I'm not going to sit here and say that all of us are looking at it that way. And they shouldn't. Because like what do you have to learn about this team to this point? Like what can they show you that is going to be better or different than what they've shown in the first 31 games? Like what do they have to prove? What do they have to validate at this point? Like the only thing that they can prove and the only thing that they can validate is just how damn good they are, and that comes in the playoffs, right? Can they
Yeah.
go further than they did last year? They got to the Eastern Conference semifinals. Can they get to the conference finals? Can they get to the NBA finals? But like we can't fast forward the season. But this idea that the Cavs need a test or they need to show something else that they haven't shown already, bleep that. I don't buy that at all. Like they've shown enough. Like these other teams got to find a way to get to their level, not the other way around. These other teams have to show that they can compete with the Cavs, not the other way around. So we can sit here and we can say that, yeah, I mean, Golden State's a stiffer test than Washington, and the Lakers are a stiffer test than Charlotte, and the Mavericks are a stiffer test than the Chicago Bulls. But it's like those teams aren't on the level of the Cavs. They don't belong in the same conversation with the Cavs. The Cavs have separated themselves from those particular teams.
Also, I agree with you, and I like that. But another fun little stat from tonight's game, because Nikola Jokic missed three threes, he was 0 for 3 on the night. Of players that have played 20 games this season, or 20 games or more this season, and average 15 minutes per game minimum, and have at least one 3-point attempt per game, Isaac Okoro is now the leader in the NBA in 3-point percentage with 49.2%, and Nikola Jokic is down to 48.7. So, like, Isaac, a guy that is rehabbing from an AC joint sprain in his right shoulder, traveled with the team to Denver, even with the high altitude and all those other things. He was on the bench celebrating. I like he's just this is a team that just wants to be around each other, right? And all the things that
Yep.
they have going on, the positivity and things of that nature. But the other
They also
thing,
want him
and
to get some workouts in on the court. He got a good one in today following shoot around. Kenny Atkinson was almost blown away by how much Isaac was able to do. Kenny Atkinson said before the game he thought it was going to be a longer stretch and he wanted to caution everybody, including me, that was going to read too much into his commentary about Isaac, saying he's not close yet. Let's not say that he's ready to come back, but Kenny was blown away by the amount of activity that Isaac was able to do with that right shoulder. He was doing some catch and shoot stuff. He was doing some standstill stuff. He was doing some dribbling. He was doing some passing. So it was good activity for Isaac, and the Cavs have a long stretch coming up before Monday where they have multiple practices, and then they're going to have another long stretch following the back-to-back where they're going to be in Dallas, and they're going to have multiple practices there. So it's just, more opportunities around the team for sure. Like Isaac wants to be around the team. They want Isaac around the team, especially on the longest road trip of the season to this point. Long road trips mean team bonding. Long road trips mean fun. Long road trips mean things that go beyond basketball, and the Cavs are hoping to accomplish those things during this road trip, and Isaac is certainly a part of that. But it's also going to be a really good opportunity for him to get some good work in on the court, just like he did following shoot around, so that he can not expedite his return, because the Cavs are going to continue to take a cautious approach, but continue the strenuous on court activity as part of his rehab process.
Yeah, Chris, and you mentioned like trade talk and the team like having fans that might want them to make a move or whatever. I had people in my mentions and in my DMs asking me about the Cleveland Charge game that took place tonight with the Cavs Cleveland Charge going up against Bronny James and the Lakers G League squad and Amani Bates and Craig Porter Jr. Amani Bates had 30 points, 5 rebounds, and 7 3-pointers. Craig Porter Jr. had 28 points, 10 assists, and 5 steals. And people were asking me, why is Imani not on the Cavs squad? And I was like, all right, here
Because
we
Ty
go again.
Jerome
We're
can only play 7 minutes at this point, with
correct.
with
And he,
how deep and talented the Cavs are.
100%. And it's like, who are you taking minutes from,
Right.
and all those different things. And then you talk about just how young Amani is and how he's still rehabbing from a knee surgery earlier this year, like trying to get back up to speed and get the confidence. Like, obviously, tonight is a great stepping stone, but they play again shortly against the same Lakers team. So you have another revamp period there. But I think when you look at this team and you look at what they've been able to accomplish this season, we've talked about it at length on this podcast, Chris. It is very delicate with what the Cavs have going on in the offseason with contracts and all those different things. Like, do you prepare Amani Bates to step in and take a spot from somebody that might not be here next year? Do the Cavs make a decision to go over the luxury tax and keep these players around because of how cohesive they are? What are the decisions that they're going to make is something that we look forward to come trade deadline time, especially, but also in the off season, because depending on how far the Cavs go, Eastern Conference Finals, NBA Finals, or shorter than that, will determine what the Cavs end up doing and what this team decides is the best course of action for their success in the future.
There's some hilariously obnoxious pounding going on above me in this hotel. I have no idea what that is. And by the way, if we would have been in the Cavs locker room, and you would have been saying, people have been in my DMs, hilarity would have ensued, and craziness would have ensued. I was having a conversation with Evan Mobley following the game, and Evan was just like, how am I supposed to concentrate right now when I have Darius and Isaac going back and forth at each other? So another moment where you said what you said would have caused um, great chaos in the Cavs locker room. I let you slide with it until the end because it felt like you were trying to make a really good point, Ethan. But you saying that people have been in my DMs, all I was thinking about was, what would Darius say if he just heard that? What would Isaac say if he just heard that? What would Donovan say if he just heard that? What would anybody have said if they just heard that? But I let you slide on this one.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. As soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, oh, there are going to be some comments.
I'm a married man, happily married, with a 3-year-old son, so my DMs are closed. Thank you very much.
My DMs are also closed, Chris. Oh man,
That's not what you said. You said they were
I
open. People were
they
sliding in.
they were not women in my DMs because they were not supposed to be there. They know better than to be in my DMs. But they were men trying to get clarity on the Amani Bates situation.
By the way, I encountered the most bizarre thing that has ever happened to me in 11 years covering the NBA tonight before the game. So I had
Not
just
whoa whoa
gotten
whoa not whoa not them having to change a hoop out after like before the
no,
game last time. Worse
no. I
than
mean,
that.
like, No, that could happen in an NBA game, depending on, a number of different factors. So, like, you don't expect that to happen necessarily, but you know that it can happen. And it's not entirely out of the ordinary because hoops break, because shot clocks malfunction, because rims get crooked, because guys dunk like Shaq and bring down hoops and stuff like that. So, in the back of your mind it could happen. So this was something that I never would have predicted in my entire life. So I had just got done writing something pregame, and I got done having my meal, and it was probably about 8 minutes on the timer before tip off. Yeah, I think it was about 8 minutes on the timer before tip off, and I had to go to the bathroom because if you're in Denver, you better drink a bunch of water because the altitude will mess with you. Like my eyes are so watery being in this city, and there are a couple of guys in the Cavs that are dealing with a head cold. Jared Allen being one of them. The altitude certainly is not helping it. It seemed like Donovan was battling a little bit of something in terms of a head cold too, so it's just something to monitor over the next couple of days. Um, but I had to go to the bathroom because I was chugging so much water. So you know how this goes. If you're in the bowels of the arena, there are different facilities that different people use based on where the media workroom is, where the Lexus Club Lounge is, where the courtside people go, and stuff like that. So here in Denver, there are a couple of different options, and one of them is like the family bathroom that is right outside the family room of the Denver Nuggets. But like that's also where the media goes. Um, so it's about 8 minutes before tip off, and I stroll into the bathroom, and who is in there? Nikola Jokic. Yeah, never thought I was going to see that. He has a locker room. I have never once seen a NBA basketball player like stop in one of those kinds of places that is not the NBA locker room. You know what I mean? Like to see Nikola Jokic in that kind of place where, the public uses it, the rich people, they use it. Obviously, families of Nuggets players, they use it. The media uses it. Workers of the Denver Nuggets arena, ball arena, they use it. But like, that's one that isn't blocked off. That's one that you don't have to have a specific pass for. And I stroll in there and I go to take a leak, and I did like a triple take. Like I looked up, I looked down at his shoes, I looked up again, I looked down at his shoes. I'm like, is that Jokic? 8 minutes before tip off? Like not working out on the court? Like using a semi-public bathroom in the bowels of the arena when the locker room is literally across the way. Literally across the way. I mean, I have never seen there are places like that inside Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, and I can tell you that I've never seen any Cavs player in any of those, and I was just stunned that I'm in that kind of bathroom, and you know one of the best players, quite possibly the best player in the entire NBA, is using a semi-public one um, in his arena, basically, right before tip off. I was baffled by that. Imagine going like into a bathroom like that, and then Victor Wembanyama is in there or something like that. You just don't expect to see something like that. Or LeBron James, like we're going to Los Angeles in a couple of days. Like he's not going to use the same bathroom that I'm going to use. That's for sure.
Not nah, that's weird. One, because it was 8 minutes before tip off, and like
I
you're
know.
you're supposed to be on the court. But like there is this running, I don't even want to say joke because he's made it so clear. Like Nikola Jokic just views this as his job. Like the NBA is his job. And like for him to be, he said, I just use toilet. Like I just use like public bathroom. Like,
Yeah.
like it's everybody else use it. Why I can't use it? It's like I don't. It that is so funny to me to think of, like, because he's not a small dude either. Like,
No.
you are a very large man. Like, why are you? Like,
Imagine
you
Joe from Cherry Creek or something like that, who's in that bathroom and he's just like, "Hey, Nicola, go get him tonight, bud."
That's insane, bro. Like, what? Why? What are the odds? Like, you walk in
Oh,
and like
no,
1%, maybe less. I don't.
Ethan, I've
That's
covered. Oh my god, a lot of games. Let's just put it that way. A lot of games in my NBA career that has never happened before, and I don't think it'll ever happen again. If we're being honest about it,
Do you think like he just like didn't realize he wasn't in the locker room, or like he just like, I don't know, like you just come off, run off the court. I gotta take a leak. Like, I'm gonna go to the closest bathroom. It's not
I
like you were
just,
like,
I just don't think he cares. I think he's just, you know, he's Jokic. He's one of one. How he behaves, how he talks, the things that he cares about. I mean, think about it. Um, like this is a guy who, won an NBA championship and like didn't really know exactly how to celebrate that. You know what I mean? Like,
horse racing, Chris. Gotta do it.
yes, he just
That,
he just instead of having a parade in Denver, he wanted to go back home and he wanted to play with his horses. It's just kind of how he is.
man. Well, one of one is definitely the way I would
Yeah.
describe him. But
Yeah.
uh, how do I bring this back to center?
On that note,
Uh,
that'll do it for today's edition of the One Angle Talk podcast.
you got it, Chris. You want to do the outro? Go ahead.
No, man, I do enough of that in my part time job with the radio
Fair.
hosting gig.
Very fair. Very fair. Well, I think that'll wrap up today's episode, as Chris said. So, with that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. This is where you can send in your questions for next week's episode of Hey Chris. This is going to be our last episode of the week, and we will be back to you come Monday morning with a preview for the Golden State Warriors game, and then post game that same night to give you an update, post game recap, all the beautiful things that we can bring to you straight to your either YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get that information. So, to get all this information and get insight during the games, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy. But we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.